Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families. Good evening, everybody at Australian Book Lovers. Our mission is to celebrate and share fabulous Australian and Indigenous authored books of all genres with readers around the globe. And it's also about finding fantastic resources and information for authors looking to write their own book or two or three. And what better resource than getting into a writer's room with some of those authors and asking them to share their experience. This is episode 155, and I am Veronica Strachan, aka V.E. Patton, a science fiction, fantasy, memoir and picture book writer and reader of as many genres as I can get my hands on, coming to you here from the lovely Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country over in Victoria. And my co-host...
Yes, I am Laurie Bell, science fiction and fantasy writer as well, but I'm going to throw in a little bit of crime there today for our lovely our writers' room tonight. So I have a supernatural murder, mystery, mayhem, crazy, what have you. So
yes, which is a goodie.
Writing a bit of everything and all sorts. And I'm also coming to you today from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country.
Fantastic. And I would like to welcome, in this episode, we're actually going to chase adventure, dive into dark alleys with thriller authors Susan Rogers and John Roosen. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Very well. Where are you coming from tonight, Susan and John?
We're coming just above Coffs Harbour. It's a little town called Corindi, and that's the Gumbai near to.
It's
excellent.
Beach, which is a lovely spot right on the coast.
Beautiful. All right. And from the other side of the country, good evening, Sean Gorman. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm beaming in from Walyalup, or as the local Whadjuk Noongar call it. Well, the colonists call it Fremantle, but the Whadjuk Noongar call it Walyalup.
Beautiful.
Walyalup.
Fantastic. And the locals, they probably call it Freo more than anything.
Of course.
Yeah, but I lived in WA for a couple of years, so I'm allowed to call it a little bit local. So there you go. We're up in Scarborough, so a bit north, but there you go. All right. So now that we know where everybody is, we know we're talking crime and thriller fiction. Let's just give everybody their blurb and a little bit of your bio, and then we'll start into some questions. So I'm going to start, Susan and John. Would you like, Laurie, you want to jump in?
And You jump in with this one, and I'll jump in with Sean's.
All right, excellent. Susan and John Roosen are co-authors of the Yoga Mat Mystery Series, and their lives are as extraordinary and unpredictable as their story. Susan's journey began with a childhood dream of writing, but she took a daring detour into the military. She conducted sting operations, ran extensive weapons training programs, and boarded ships in stormy seas. She shifted gears to responding to crises across California, then abroad in New Zealand, Australia, and the Middle East. In her spare time, she wrenched a presidential yacht, the USS Potomac, from its watery grave, transforming it into a museum. John's career reads like a spy novel. Biologist turned hazardous materials expert with superhuman skills. Racing across every continent from Antarctica to the Middle East, he's dismantled drug labs, responded to chemical plant explosions, and chased pirates in the South Pacific. Their backgrounds are packed with adrenaline, danger, and real-world experience, making their stories not just thrilling, but authentic. When they write, they draw from their own incredible adventures, bringing a raw, visceral edge to every page. So get ready for mysteries rooted in reality, fueled by lives lived on the edge, because these authors don't just tell stories, they've lived them. Yeah, love that bio.
I love your bio, guys.
Knowing it's So very true is a hoot. All right. The blurb for Cobra Pose, which is a mystery thriller suspense, a deadly cyber heist, a missing father, and a race against time. When Elena Williams' father Edward vanishes without a trace, the yoga instructor turned amateur sleuth is thrust into a deadly game of cat and mouse. A high stakes cyber heist. Now, I'm going to say that's a really tough one to say. Could you have rewritten that, please? When you say it out loud, that is it's a bit tough. Let me give it one more go. All right. A high stakes cyber heist is about to rip through the global financial system, and her father may be caught in the crossfire. With Rick Peters, a battle-hardened photojournalist with secrets of his own, by her side, Elena follows a dangerous trail of digital deception, from the sun-drenched streets of Brisbane to an isolated island off Queensland, Australia. The Cobra and the Wolf, a shadowy duo of international criminals, are ready to strike. Billions are at risk, and so are their lives. As time runs out, Elena and Rick must unravel the mystery before Edward disappears forever. But with ruthless hackers, corrupt officials, and an enemy who always seems one step ahead, can they outmaneuver the predators before it's too late? Cobra Pose delivers a pulse-pounding mix of mystery, cyber intrigue, and slow-burning romance. Get ready for a heart-racing thriller where trust is a luxury and survival is the ultimate challenge. Da-da! There you go.
Yeah.
That is an absolute mouthful and sounds like it would be, heart-stopping. It'd be one of those movies where you can't get up and go and get a cup of tea because something else is about to happen. Is that about right?
It's it's a thriller in the sense that it's high speed, it's algorithmic.
Yes.
We patterned it after an actual hacking event and something that occurred to us, but actually happened to us. But we wanted it to be fast paced so that you aren't getting up to get some popcorn or tea.
That's right.
Because every minute something new is happening.
Yeah.
And the pathway to the end is full of clues that you have to be aware as it's moving along. So it is very fast paced. And like I said, it's at algorithmic hacking speed.
Brilliant. All right.
Wow, I love it. That's one of those books that I'll either not be able to go to bed in time and be late for work the next day because I've slept in, or miss the train. It's going to be one of the two.
Say that we were in the library when we found out that Optus got hacked a few years ago, and that was half the country that was impacted.
Yeah.
Hacked, we were absolutely excited and yelling in the library, "This is so fantastic, this is wonderful," because they had used a method that was very similar to the one that we had
Oh.
within this book 2 years in advance. So it was
Oh.
a magic moment for us.
Made it all the more real.
Well, it sure did.
Oh.
Well, let me tell you all about Sean. So, Sean Gorman lives in Freo, Fremantle, where he ruminates and writes about shit. After years of grinding away on Shootin' Through, Gorman couldn't land a publishing deal for Love or Dimmy, so he did it himself. This self-published audiobook is proof of his grit and refusal to give up. Shootin' Through is a raw, unapologetic dive into a world that was once dragging its ghosts into the light with humour, authenticity, and zero sentimentality. Plug in your headphones, crank it up, and enjoy the ride. Dimmy's on the house.
Yes, Jimmy's on the house.
Dimmy's on the house. I love it. This one's so Aussie, and knowing that it's read by Limo it just gives that voice, I think. But anyway, we'll get into that. So the blurb for Shootin' Through is set in late 1979. Shootin' Through is a raw, high-octane road trip through outlaw Australia. Michael Duck Donnell and his wild mate Barry Pinky Salter steal a valiant charger and tear across the Nullarbor, running from their boring lives and chasing freedom. Joined by the street-smart Missy, they find themselves hunted by bikies, crooked cops, and the brutal WA underworld. With a rifle in the boot and chaos on their heels, their desperate dash to Sydney's 2SM concert of the decade becomes a fight to stay alive.
Yay, good
Yeah,
one.
that sounds so good.
Yeah, 1979. I got my license in 1978. And my brother had a Valiant, so I did some of my lessons in a
There
Valiant.
you
So there
go.
you
Wow.
go.
There
So
you
I,
go.
I know the era. I do know the era, and it's a very timely for me. So that tells you exactly how old I am. But we can move on.
I was probably screaming quite loudly in 79. That's about as far as I'm willing to get into with 79. So let's move on.
Classic. Classic.
So, Sean, audiobook. Did you
Mm,
start with the idea of it being an audiobook?
not at all. Not at all. I was trying to get it published in the usual ways and means, and I thought, well, the landscape in terms of how we consume literature and anything these days has changed significantly. What with the internet, so on and so forth. And I thought, well, if the AFL during their grand final halftime break are advertising on television Audible, and they have done,
Mm.
that shows you just in terms of how much it has changed, because obviously there is a significant situation in that regard for, again, how people consume things. So I thought, well, instead of having a garage full of books collecting dust, I might as well have it somewhere in a cloud somewhere. And it was a great opportunity to see how the book could come alive through the use of someone like Anthony Limo Lehman, who I've known for a while, and he was on top of the list. And I actually, when I went to him and said, "Look, you can actually build out your dramatic arcs with this and your yeah, your range." He jumped at it, and he did a fantastic job in that regard. And it was just a wonderful experience to be able to deal with that from that point of view. So yeah, so that was the rationale for the audio book, was to actually, and low carbon footprint. So it says, all of those things, they're all sort of factored into it as a means to take it from there. And unlike Susan and John's situation of being algorithmic, mine was very much organic in that regard. So it's all set in a particular time. 79, Skylab falls out of the sky. That gets a berth in the book. Mad Max has its premiere, the great Australian film. The 2SM concert of the decade, which is the quest where the boys are heading to. And it's Chico Rolls, servo burgers, countdown, you name it, all that. So it's very much set in its time before the 80s kick in and the greed is good mantra becomes part of the vernacular.
So tell us, while you're on there, Sean, tell us what was the inspiration behind, did you do the drive to
No, I nearly got to drive from Melbourne to Perth one time, but my wife wasn't she wasn't into it, so
okay.
which was disappointing. But it was basically, it was a very warm evening during a Perth summer about 7 years ago, and I was just algorithmically speaking, I was just scrolling through YouTube clips of Countdown and other jingles and these sorts of things, and all of a sudden up popped the 2SM concert of the decade, headlining Stevie Wright.
Mm,
And he did Evie's parts 1 to 3, which was
ah.
the classic. And if you haven't seen it, I would recommend for yourselves and your listeners and viewers to go onto YouTube and check it out. It is a tour de force, and it is meant to be his springboard and to reset his career after the easy beats and his battles with drugs. And basically, it acts as a kind of a metaphor. That he doesn't get there, because if you know your history in terms of that, he kind of then that's the start of the demise. So, but the 2SM concert of the decade, I saw it at 2 o'clock in the morning, and it just kept playing out in my brain, and I just had to write about it. I thought, well, how do I do it? Well, there's a road narrative here, and there was all manner of things I could have done. So, yeah, that's how it all came about, through YouTube.
Thanks, YouTube. Please note that, and give us some more subscribers, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so Susan and John, life of incredible adventure, strange happenings, unique opportunities. Why writing?
You go first.
Well, what's interesting about the Yoga Mat Mysteries is that yoga is supposed to be something relaxing, and
Mm.
that happens. So now we're writing murder, suspense, thriller, mysteries, which is pretty much the opposite. And it came about because we had a yoga studio when we lived in Sydney, right across the street. And when we were there, it was relaxing and we felt calm and fantastic. And then you walk outside, and of course, you're back in the busy streets. So we really like the kind of contrast that occurs. And we thought
the juxtaposition between the calmness and a murder mystery. But
Mm.
we both had for a very long time lives that were in tense situations frequently. In doing some of the sting operation work and things like that, it's mentally very tiring. So we were trying to use yoga as a way of calming ourselves down. And one session, we went out to dinner afterwards, and I started doodling on a cloth napkin in a restaurant, and Yoga Mat Mysteries was born. I had to buy the napkin because it was cloth, and I was using an ink pen.
Oh, no.
The restaurant owners were a little upset at first, but then they started to get into it, and that's how it was born. We actually use the book somewhat like therapy because it allows us to talk about some things that have happened to us and create these characters to us who are real. It's hard to differentiate sometimes whether they're real or not, but the experiences are, and that's how Yoga Mat Mysteries got born.
John, do you mean the characters aren't real?
Very good. All right. Let's look, because crime and thriller fiction and mysteries, it's a huge genre, and there's psychological thrillers and there's suspense and there's all sorts of things. But tell me, if you think about, your world, your genre as a large section of reading, what do you think makes a good unputdownable crime or thriller read? Sean, what do you think are the key elements in it?
I think the it has to be real. I think you have to tap into a certain veracity. You have
Mhm.
to actually keep it like, and that's why I love, reading Peter Temple, primarily because I can hear the cadence in the language. I can see and feel, smell the surrounds and everything that is going on there. So you're alive to that as a thing. And I think, the action can play out the way that it plays out, whether that's a relatively straightforward formulaic way, or it can be a little bit quirky or a bit different or a bit obvious in that regard and those things too. So, but at the same time, I think it's the believability that can enable you to identify and understand and empathize even with the antagonists in that regard. But I think if there's a degree of BS in that regard, or if you're trying too hard, or you're overreaching in that regard, I think that can somewhat diminish or devalue what you're trying to do. Sometimes saying nothing or having a pause or giving the reader a chance to stop a little bit and then get back into it is a really important thing. So whilst I'm not that au fait with the thriller as a genre, and even with the crime fiction piece with Shootin' Through, that started out as, I don't even know what that started out as. It started out as something, and it sort of morphed its way into this hybridized, you know, multi focused type piece of whatever it is now. But I think you've got to believe what people are saying and what is going on. And if you can do that, I think you're halfway there. That would be my advice and what I try to do. I try to give it a truth, and that's the key to it.
Yeah, it makes it relatable. And if it's relatable, you can see yourself there.
Absolutely, and I've picked up a number of, and I won't mention which authors they are, but they're well known. And sometimes the language in it can be a little bit sort of safe, which is not to
Mm.
say we need to be gratuitous in the ways that we use language, but a solid swear word at the right time can actually, it gives it a power to that. And again, not using it gratuitously, but using it in a timed way, I think is a really key part to that. So yeah, absolutely. That would be my insight or advice in that regard.
Yeah, thanks. Susan and John, what are your thoughts about making things unputdownable?
The characters have to have the depth and capacity for what they're doing. I agree with Sean. You have to write about the realism of what happens. And sometimes authors get carried away. In law enforcement, or you're taking down a drug lab, it's not shoot 'em up, bang, bang all the time. And there's moments when there are other things happening that you have to write about. So it has to be the passion, believability of the character. And I would agree with him 100% that characters need to be realistic. And you run across characters in books where you wonder how they're still alive. They're so full of bullet holes and they're carrying around so much lead they must weigh twice what they did before. But making the story believable, passionate, and something that you can identify with, you can attach to that character, whether he or she is a good person or a bad person or whatever. You have to be able to identify them to make them realistic, and the story has to be realistic.
So I'll add a sword to this one. We're on an Air New Zealand plane, and we're coming back to the Gold Coast from New Zealand. And we're talking about a particular murder weapon we want to use, but we were exploring all options. And we're sitting, crowded plane, we're sitting there. We're saying, okay, well, what if we use a knife? What if we use a knife? John says, well, no, but we could use a gun. That's possible. There's a couple of different weapons. Well, what about a poison? A poison's great. The lady in the seat in front of us jumps up and she said, get me out of the seat. These people are trying to kill someone.
I explained to her that we were writing a story in a book, and she did not have it. She wanted us to move, and she ended up being moved someplace else.
Oh dear.
She just didn't believe that we were just talking about a plot in a book.
So I passion is one of
but
the
plot
elements.
sounded really
real, very real. It's like people said, don't check writers' internet searches because you'll have, what's the best poison to do this, or how far away do I need to be for a 22 to do damage? Yes, all those things. Well, there you go, so a real life story.
It's very, very difficult to do research. I was trained in forensics for a while. And if you try to do searches on avoiding DNA online and things, you get a knock on the door at 2 a.m. A couple of police officers standing there asking, what is it that you do for a living?
Wow. Well, then, speaking of, okay, so staying with you, Susan and John, so what then makes a good twist, in your opinion? Particularly with the amazing things that you've both experienced and gone through and seen. What what is unrealistic and what is realistic as a twist for you both?
I think a twist has to have the elements planted in the book so that the person reading it might notice the clues. We drop clues as we go along because we want our twist to be the aha moment or to catch somebody out, but we want them to understand that this was been building in the story. In television or movies, you can simply insert something and just say, well, nobody knew about this, and this is your twist. We believe the twist has to be honest, that it has to have development throughout the book, and you may not expose what exactly the twist is going to be, but it has to have a foundation, not just drop it in from a helicopter and say, oh, you didn't know anything about this, and this is how the twist works. So that's, to us, a good twist. What would you think is a bad twist?
So the bad twist is when the reader or listener, because like Sean, we do audiobooks. And so you have to really think in two levels here when you're writing and then how it sounds. So we want to be on the same team as both the reader and the listener, so that as they're moving along, when they get to that aha moment, they said, oh yeah, now I see it. This is fantastic. But when you can't do that, and it's just like John says, you drop from a plane, voila, it doesn't come off to the reader or listener. So it's not as exciting to them. It's not as real.
Yeah, I do like to be a little bit surprised. Sorry, Laurie, because I know my eldest is so good at the mystery. She guesses like within 5 minutes of the first scene or page or whatever. But it takes me really all the way till they're actually explaining the twist usually. But I like that because I like to be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to be right, so I like being able to pick it.
Okay.
So, Sean, because your writing was very organic when you were writing yours, and very, very much that pantser, which I totally understand because that's how I start every book. What about you with twists? How did you organically come across your
Well,
road trip?
again, it's so interesting. I didn't set out. I did not set out. I've got mates. I know Dave Wish-Wilson, and he's a well-known West Australian crime fiction writer, and a number of other friends who write in that genre. And I gave him one of the early iterations of the manuscript, and he said, "Oh, the end. I didn't see that coming." And I
Ah.
had no, and I didn't say, "I need you to keep an eye out for this. I need you to keep an eye out for that. Tell me." I just got him to read it, and he goes, "I didn't see that coming. That was really good." And I went, "Oh, okay, right." And so it really was one of those things. There was never a formula, even though I've had again other mates who write crime fiction have been published. So this is the formula for it. And I went, I don't know about that. I'm a bit skeptical, a bit jaded. I think a good twist. I really like the dry, where the last bit, it's the school teacher or the school principal who's done it, and because
Yes.
of knowing, the I suppose the pressures and the issues around country and rural Australia, having grown up in those areas, the pressures that are on people are immense. So to see that twist in that situation regarding a school principal and the fact that he'd spent the money on gambling because he should have been using it as part of the grant money for the school and didn't, I thought was really, really refreshing. And also, and I don't want to mention this, but I will. You watch on Netflix, Harlan, is it Coben's? It's a twist after a twist after a twist. I feel like Chubby Checker at the end of it. You know what I mean? You just go, what are you trying to prove? It's almost like you're trying to show off. And I think that's that veracity piece, that truth piece, where you go, yeah, you don't really have to do that. You've just got to keep people focused on what it is that, you're talking about, the narrative and the plot and the characters and the dialogue and these sorts of things, and the other stuff will come. But I just find watching those, I watched a couple and I just went, yeah, no, it's not for me. So I just think you've got to, play it out as it goes and mess around with it and see what comes of it. And like I said, I was surprised that I'd actually done that when I wasn't expecting to do it at all. So there you go.
There you go.
I
Well
think
done.
actually something you feel. I mean, I'm just thinking about what Sean's talking about now. And I think it's almost something you feel in your gut. You can almost tell that it's right and not making it so that it's something that's required at this particular junction. It's absolutely what you feel inside. And I think that's what makes it real to the listener or the reader.
Mm.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, so that's a nice segue into the next question, which is, given that there is often a lot of violence and murder and, impolite things happening in crime and thrillers, how do you balance that kind of realism, which we've just said and we all say that we love, with the kind of, social difficulties, violence that's in our communities and all of that kind of thing. How do we, and it's not justified because, we wouldn't read crime and thrillers if we didn't enjoy them. But how do you sort of balance that with what's going on in the world? What's the balance for you guys?
I think it's something that Sean said before too. It's about being gratuitous about the violence.
Mm.
When we write, we use the reader's imagination. And we often find that the reader's imagination is much more powerful than anything we could write. So we create the circumstances and we keep it at a level which you understand there was violence or something violent done to a person without going too much into the graphics, because I think sometimes that becomes a distraction. People get caught into the actual blood and gore of what occurred, and they forget about what the plot is or where this is heading. So we try to strike a balance between showing a bad thing happening and letting their imagination fill in the blank, much like when you're looking at something, you have a dead spot in your eye behind the retina. your brain fills in the rest of the picture. And it does that automatically. So we often use what a reader might imagine, using their imaginations to fill in those blanks. And that's how I think we come to an equilibrium or a balance. So enough in the writing to make it have grit and reality to it, but there's no need to go into just long pages of descriptions about it. So that's the kind of balance. And we have a broad reading audience. And I think a lot of the people that read our works are interested in how we use our words and interested in the plot, but they know bad things happen and we describe those things. And that's just part of life.
I guess I just add a sentence by saying, here we are talking about murder, and in every one of our books there is murder, and there's crime, and there's issues at stake that are very large. In the last book we wrote, it was a skull that was discovered on a site, which was actually a real life event that occurred to us. But what we try to do is use the mystery element of the book. So we try to weave that golden thread of mystery throughout so that the reader is always saying, gee, I wonder how this fits with everything else. And that mystery element comes through for them to be the participant in whatever it is that we're describing.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, Sean, what are your thoughts there?
I don't, the gore and the guns and the the violence that plays out. I really like the implied notion of violence, the threat of it, and the ways that plays out, and and it was mentioned earlier on by Laurie, the situation with the weapon sequestered deep into the bowels of the valiant charger, which the boys find. And that becomes like this allegory for the violence that has occurred in the past, but what potentially is going on. And it's used as a prop a few times throughout the story. But just to, again, I always prop to filmic representations in that regard. And that's the reason why I think I love the Fargo film and the Fargo series, because of the ways that, again, violence is implied a lot of the time. It's metaphysical and it's psychological, and it's the ways that those bad guys in that series, particularly the first one with Billy Bob Thornton, it's the ways that he just has to look at the way he goes about doing things, that this guy's bad.
Yes.
And
even when he starts as good, I said to my husband one time in the interview, I said, he's going to be the bad one. I don't care whether he's smiling. He's going to be the bad one.
And even when he's being kind of nice and trying to, being the sort of like the arbiter of the moral compass, saying, well, do you really want me to do this? Do you really? This is your choice. This is my choice. This is your choice. And the ways that then plays out. So I really like the ways that, the violent action is taken off the screen, so to speak, or off the page, and you go, right, well, what would have happened there? But for me, I suppose, with regards to Shootin' Through, it's the threat of violence or the threat of something bad happening, which our three protagonists are either running away from, but actually driving towards at the same time. And we don't know which one that is. So it kind of jumps out when you least expect it, is what I've tried to do there, which was a lot of fun to do. So, but yeah, that would be my position on that situation.
And I think us as readers as well, we have a tendency, our imaginations are worse than what any writer is going to come up with. So it's amazing.
It's why the X-Files worked.
Yeah. Favorite series of all time. And yes, you're talking to two X-Files people here. And of course, having a health background, you only need to give me a little bit of information and I can absolutely imagine all the rest. But it does also have a downside, whereas I'm thinking, they wouldn't be able to walk if the bullet was there. I'm sorry. And they're not going to get up and be able to punch somebody when anyway. So there are, those realistic things.
Yeah. I've dislocated my knee. There's no way I'm walking on that.
Yeah.
Well then, okay, that's actually a really good segue into, so with the bad guys in your stories and the morally grey characters and that antagonist that causes a lot of the drama, how do you think that I think that reflects something about our culture and storytelling traditions about the bad guy being bad and being really obvious about it. But how do you make your bad guys that more realistic so you can see how they would get to that point in their lives as to why they've done what they've done? Um, did you want to start, Sean?
Yeah, I think having a binary situation in terms of that is pretty passé. It can be pretty boring, and it locks you in to write in a binary way. Whereas again, to use Fargo as the example, everyone is flawed and everyone has a moment where you think, well, they're going to do this or they're going to do that, and you don't really know because even though they might seem good, they possibly aren't, and vice versa. So I just think the moral ambiguity that goes with it, I think is really fascinating because, yeah, we all make mistakes or we all have things that we wish we hadn't have done, but we've done them and we can't change it. It's it's just the way that it is. And, when we start going down these, I suppose the beauty of working in this particular forum and writing about it is you can play around with it a bit and you can have a bit of fun with it. And, you don't have to point fingers and say, well, that person's wrong and all the rest of it, even though they clearly are because of what they're doing. But yeah, the moral, who becomes the arbiter of the moral piece, who becomes the judge of that, how that works out, and why are we making those judgments? Is that because of religion, or is that our how we've grown up, or is that just something inherent? How do we look at that? And it changes over time too. I know, just in terms of the ways that I saw things years ago, I don't see them. Some of those have become more amplified, but yeah, I think that moral grey area, that is a shifting line constantly, and it's how we negotiate it and deal with that with regards to the other characters and the narrative and the plot lines and all the stuff that goes with it, which provides us with a space to explore and understand those things more. So that would be the way that I'd locate myself in that regard.
Susan, Sean?
I think I have to agree with a lot of what Sean was saying. We look at in the places we've worked in the world, we've been posted in the military in a lot of different locations in the Middle East and other places. And the world's gray. It's not that it's any one place that functions that way. There in every culture and in every place you are, there are gray parts. We have characters that are that way. Francis, our hired or our hitman in two of the books, is a person who has got a very gray life. And he is a hitman, he kills for money. But what we try to do is we try to show where Francis has come from and how he's gotten to where he is. It's not that you really want to understand the hitman or why he's doing what he's doing, but it does give credence to how he got there. And I think it's important for the reader to understand how these people got that way, that there are gray parts in the world, that we make decisions that, as Sean was saying, sometimes we regret, and I have made those decisions. And I have regretted them, and they had very bad impact on people. But it's understanding how you got there, how you made that decision, how you were created in the mold you are, that you made that decision. It's important in the stories that we write to explain that as you're going through the plot.
I'll just add that when you look back in history and go back to the Greeks, 8,000 years ago, and you listen to the theater that they did, there's so many characters that they created from gray to black to white, and they've created things and role models that we all, in many ways, are emulating through what we write now. So yes, there are gray characters, but there are also very strong characters, very admirable characters. And I think that in many books, you see the whole range. And that's really what helps the reader say, hey, wait a minute, I'm not alone in this. I've seen this myself.
How far do you think thrillers have come since the early days of, well, I guess Hercule Poirot and Agatha Christie were not quite thrillers as in the day, but they were the original, some of the crime and you know, Mr. Watson and Sherlock Holmes. What do you think today's political climate does to a crime and thriller? And you know, Susan and John, you were saying that you got excited about the Optus, the hack, because there are obviously different things to write about with technology and those kind of things. But do you think that it's changed the boundaries of thrillers, or has it altered the tropes that people love to read about because of what's happening in the world today?
I think, unfortunately, what's happening uh, a lot in politics today in various parts of the world, some of which I won't talk about.
Hmm.
Um, people, because of social media and media, are feeding off these incidents, and they sort of translate that into what they want to see in writing. So it does have a big influence on what you write and how you write it. It's writing that is at a much faster pace. Situations change rapidly, and books are beginning to reflect those things. Sometimes what we try to do in our stories is to slow things down a little bit, so people have a point where they can think about the story and digest it a little bit, because we're given a daily diet of clicking and scrolling. It is endless. It is ponderous. It reminds me of the chains that Marley dragged around in Christmas Carol, and it is a ponderous long chain. So we try to slow things down in parts so people have a little bit of chance to think about what's going on. But politics and social media have definitely shaped the way books are written now.
I just want to add one quick comment here in that we think humor actually goes, I mean, we're writing murder mysteries, suspense thrillers, but every once in a while you'll find in every book we write, you know, there's just a tad of humor, and there will be an incident or something funny or something that somebody says. And often people write us and they say, hey, you know, I'm just laughing out loud in the middle of all this sequence.
Of the mayhem.
Yeah. And that's okay with us because we've created that momentary pause that John was talking about, just to slow it down a little bit and say, you know what, life is pretty funny when you stop and look at it. So it's nice to enjoy those wonderful, humorous, kind of crazy moments that occur.
Mm. Sean.
No, fantastic answer. I for me, it's like the things I really love to engage with is, you know, the ways that the political systems are operating these days and issues around particularly diplomacy and
Mm.
how we see that that's changed with America and the ways that they are doing things at the moment, which has taken, you know, it's taken a great toll on them and those sorts of things. But the ways that the internet and the ways that the world has played out over time, and you know, we're always warned about things like AI and you know the ways that this can, you know, not be good for us because we're not thinking about stuff, we're just simply, you know, putting it into a machine. I think issues around diplomacy have also changed. You've only got to, you know, watch a, you know, films like Killing Softly with Brad Pitt, or the one have watched lately and keep watching because of it's so well written and so well acted, is A Most Wanted Man with Philip Seymour Hoffman, the late actor. And it is fascinating how, you know, in that post 9/11 landscape and issues around people fleeing war-torn countries and how they are dealing with it, and what enactants within those broader mega narratives or meta narratives, what, you know, the roles of people in these are, and how, if you look at that particular film with Philip Seymour Hoffman, a Most Wanted Man, you get a real understanding of what diplomacy is required in terms of those things, which is, you know, not so much a counterpoint, but an extension on from what we've seen in America with regards to Anthony Albanese at the moment, and how he's copped a lot of flack in terms of stuff, but he's managed to handle it really well considering. But I think the world has changed significantly, obviously since 1979 and be even further back than that. And I just think that, yeah, it's hard to try to get a beat on things these days because, again, because of that moral greyness thing, the good guys are not America and Australia anymore.
Mm.
And we've got these, the internet and things like, documentary series, which actually start unpacking these things for us. And it's up to us to now then make a decision in terms of that now, for good or bad. And I just think we've got to become more informed as to what this actually represents for us as people, as a society, but what that actually means in terms of issues around tyranny, really, and how that manifests itself. And we've got to be very careful that it doesn't get so big that we are just dealing with this global meltdown because of wars and these sorts of things too. So, yeah, I agree with everything that Susan and John say in that regard. But, yeah, it's how we consume that product or how we consume those things which determine what we are what we eat, as they say. We are what we consume. So we've got to be able to, and that's why reading is so important, is because it enables you to get a different perspective on things. Just put it down, walk away, have a cup of tea, come back and go over it again, and to try and, ruminate on what is the best way to go, which I think is a really healthy way of dealing with it, as opposed to just watching things on Netflix or just watching, Al Jazeera or, Fox News or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, it's an interesting time and will continue to be so.
Bringing it back home then with Aussie crime. Aussie crime's such a thing, and it definitely is getting more traction overseas. There seems to be a real attraction to Aussie crime. What is an Aussie crime? So what in your mind makes your stories really Aussie? And I know, Sean, there's some very obvious, clear Aussiness into your story, but what do you think is what's so attractive about that Aussiness, the 80s, the 70s, 80s of where your books say it?
I think it actually captures a time. And again, to go back to that 2SM concert and the YouTube footage, it was like, okay, and you're looking at people, they're dressed a bit differently, they look a bit different, but they're really just us. They're on the steps of the Sydney Opera House, which is, iconic. So I think for me, it's trying to, again, keep truthful to the ways that those things are and the ways that people talk about it. I was watching something some time back, and it was set in the late 70s, so very similar to the Shootin' Through. And one of the characters said, "Oh, I'm going to process that." They would never have said that back then. And I immediately got irritated
Clocked
by
it.
that. It's how, I'll get back to you on that, mate. You know what I mean? So you've got to be really careful about the ways that the tone of the language, the vernacular is used and in what way. And, using terms like, calling someone a pissant, which was very much, of the day also, or what are you, mate?
Yeah.
Sorts of things. So, and then building that, the mise en scène up a little bit more in terms of that and making sure it runs in simpatico with one another. I think that is really, really clear for me. And, I'm lucky that I've been able to get a Valiant Charger, drive across the Nullarbor and get to, a classic space. It's as Aussie as it gets, mate.
Yeah, you couldn't get much more, indeed.
That's right,
Sean, John, Susan, John, what brings out the Aussiness in your tales?
Sorry, here, I'll jump in first.
Okay.
And we have the wonderful opportunity because we've immigrated to Australia. So we've had the opportunity to have a different background to start with, but we had this wonderful opportunity to celebrate what is Australia. And we probably see it as a contrast, so we can see it kind of right away. We can see the things that are different. And we feel like we can use that in writing our books because our characters are Australian for the most part. And although Rick was born in New Zealand, we kind of give him that. And so
Close enough.
That's part of Australia, isn't
Oh,
it?
yeah. Especially when they win medals and do stuff.
state.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity for us to kind of look and see, wow, this is so fantastic we can weave that through. And you'd be surprised how many readers say, I feel like I've been to Australia. I feel like I've been to Brisbane. I've been to Tasmania, or I can't wait to go. I'm going to put that first on my bucket list, because we describe it so that it feels like someplace they want to go check out and or the other.
Yeah.
We were working in Greece a couple of months ago, and we're writing a book about an incident there. And people heard our accents and asked us where we were living. And the fascination level of any general population you go to about Australia, Australasia, this part of the world, it is unbelievable the number of people that want to come here, that want to hear about it. And we deliver that in the writing. We have to be very careful about the vernacular we use and the language and the spelling. We have to be very precise about it. And we do very, very heavy research in that area. But Australia is like the most incredible lure. It's like a beacon to people, and they want to hear about it. They want the descriptions. And that's why we get very descriptive when we're talking about the incidents that happen in Australia. And people want to live it. And that's an important part of what we build into our books. But Australia is you just start talking about Sydney or some other place in Australia on an airplane, and you've got 3 or 4 people listening in, and they want to know about where you're from, what do you do, are there snakes there, all the questions, sharks, it's just amazing interest. But we have to build that into the book and the series, and that's what we do. It's a draw for people.
So what colour was the Valiant Charger, Sean, just while we're quietly waiting here?
It's orange.
Oh, like it was.
I love it.
But it's not just orange. You can't just call it orange. It's actually the factory colour is actually called vitamin C.
Oh,
wow.
That's what it's called. So it's a vitamin C coloured Valiant Charger. So there was a range of them that came out at the time. There was magenta, and there was off-white, and there was I think there was a hot pink, another hot pink colour. But that was it. It was very much a part of the day. And I've also made really good connects with the Chrysler or the Charger Society here in Western Australia, which is actually quite big. They've got a membership, and they've been fantastic. And there's some amazing, beautiful looking machines there. And I'm not into cars or muscle cars or anything like that, but it's these things are works of art, is what. So, but I've got them on my social media. I've got some of them on the website and these sorts of things too. So it's look, just and seeing how amazing these vehicles are, these muscle cars of the time. And Tim Ross actually had a podcast which looked at the cars that made Australia, and they had the Mini Moke and the the Leyland P76 and these sorts of things. But the mini Miner, but the Valiant Charger was one of those because it was the most powerful car of its type in the day. I didn't realise this, but it was seen as the muscle car of all muscle cars, as opposed to the Monaros or the GT Shaker. I was saying I don't know about cars.
Just to say
But it was a Valiant vitamin C charger. It had to be orange. It had to be.
Had to be. Very good. All right. Well, let's keep going while we're waiting for John and Susan to come back. Tell me then, if you, sorry, is it your shot, Laurie?
No, you go. Jump in.
All right. I was just going to say, what's the most thrilling thing then you've ever done in real life? You admitted that you didn't actually go across the Nullarbor, but where are you on the thrill stakes?
I don't know if it was a thrill. I think it was the scariest thing. I was when I was living down deep in the great southern of Western Australia in a place called Albany. We went fishing one time, and it was, it's quite cold and rugged down there, a bit like the sort of like the coast of Victoria in many respects, very, rocky in parts and all that sort of stuff. And we'd gotten there late to set up camp, and it was just as the sun was going down. There's no one around. It's hard to get to. And one of my mates who was he was in the state squad for the cricket team here in WA, and he's a big strapping bugger. And anyway, he just said, let's go for a quick swim. So he's just started swimming out into the Southern Ocean off a very remote part of the state, way down. And I followed him for no particular reason. And then I reckon I'd probably whacked in about 10 good overarm strokes because I'm quite a strong swimmer. And I looked up and we were felt like miles out. The undertow had taken us and all the rest of it. And we looked at one another and we just went, we've got it, because the sun was going down. It was going to be dark within 10, 15 minutes. So we had to get there, and it was hard work, but we got there. And I must admit, it was quite a relief to get back on land, given the stupidity and the naivety of us on that particular day. So yeah, that's something that sticks out, that I should have died on that day through one means or another, being eaten by a shark or drowning.
It's a really rough coast down there for sure. Very brave. Yeah, I wouldn't do more than paddling. I'm not a great swimmer. Susan and John, welcome back. Good to see you got that internet working. We were just quizzing Sean on the most thrilling or as he admitted, the most scariest thing he's ever done. You know, what have you got? What would you put up there as your most thrilling?
It's not classified, of course.
Well, yeah, don't tell us. You're not allowed to.
There was an incident in a minefield where they got the marking wrong.
So
we ended up in a minefield that we didn't know we were in. But the one that really sticks out to me was I was a glider pilot, and I was flying in California, and I flew under a thunderhead. So all of a sudden, this glider that I'm in was made in Czechoslovakia, and all of a sudden I'm being sucked up into the thunderhead at about 700 feet per minute.
Oh, wow.
And there's lightning and everything happening, and I suddenly reached the altitude of about 10,000 feet. And that's the oxygen level at that. That's where you should be on oxygen at that level. And I thought I was going to die. But pilots don't like ice on their wings because the control surfaces don't work. So thankfully, I got ice on my wings, and I could not make the aircraft go down. It was just like a vacuum cleaner. So the ice formed, made the wings heavier, blocked the airflow, and then the plane suddenly just nosedived towards the ground. And I was nearing the earth. The ice started to melt off the wings. I got control back, and I'm actually living because of that. So that was something that I can remember that time. I knew I was going to die. I just wanted it to be really fast.
Okay, my thrilling moment.
Yeah, go, Susan.
Marrying John.
Wow.
You can imagine living with this guy.
Can I have a recording? Can I have a recording of this?
Absolutely.
You can imagine living with this guy. You know, the incident he just described is one of 1,000. And so pretty much anything anybody's done that's thrilling, John's also done it in a little weird, crazy, different way.
And has some accidents doing it.
So it is a thrill a minute living with him. And I got to say, he's also a great cook. So I mean, had a benefit in this whole deal.
Perfect.
Yes.
Definitely a keeper.
Very good. All right. Now, let me ask you then, favorite fictional villain, Susan?
You know, John was talking about Francis earlier, which is our favorite fictional villain. And it's quite interesting. You know, we've got this guy who's a hitman, and readers say, oh, could you please don't make him die? Don't knock him off. You know, I need it for the next. I mean, even the guy who does our audiobook recording, Rupert Degas, he says, oh, you know, you kill him off. I really like his accent, you know. So, I mean, you know, we've got to keep this guy in for the sake of it. But I would say villain would be the classic Scrooge that John mentioned earlier. You know, this is a guy you just hate. And some of the lines he had are terrible. But in the end, there's just a little bit of goodness in him that swings it around. So I guess my villains come right in the end.
Very good. What about you, John?
there was a movie that Michael Douglas played in. He played a character, Gordon Gecko, and his
Oh.
favorite, his thing was greed is good, and I think
Mm.
it was Wall Street or something like that. And
Mm.
he's just this vile, contemptuous creature that's driven by greed, and you just want to stuff a cheeseburger into his mouth and watch him die. You know, so he's one of my favorite. He's one of my favorite villains.
Yeah, very good.
Fantastic.
All right, Sean, who's on top of your list?
Oh God, where do you start? I I reckon Verbal Klimt out of The Usual Suspects, Kevin Spacey's
Oh yeah.
character,
Yeah.
because it's so manipulative
Mm.
and evil, and basically gets away with it, and you go, wow, man, wow.
You
Anyway,
just
yeah,
watch
that
those feet and it's like, oh.
well, that was another one I didn't get. I didn't get it to the end, and another friend of mine said, I got it. I got it in the first 5 minutes. I went,
No, no.
anyway, there you go.
Oh, very good.
Well, all right. Well, what's some advice that you would give writers starting out, writing their crime novel, writing their thriller, writing that reality Aussie outback story? What advice are you giving them, Susan?
Well, I'll start. Definitely. Thank you for that. Don't give up. No matter what, if you've got a passion to write, you absolutely don't give up. Don't get, no matter what anybody says, no matter, if it's your parents or your roommate or whatever it is, don't give up. If you've got a passion for writing, you'll find a way. You'll figure out, because that's what writing is all about. You zigzag your way through it until you eventually figure it out. And there will always be a way for writers and audiobook producers and people who are in the creative industry. There will always be there.
Mm.
My big thing though is when you're starting out is to, I hate to say this, but organize what you're going to write about, and just pen it down onto paper or on a wall or something anywhere,
Napkin.
and kind of use it. Yeah, but not a cloth napkin. But go to a less expensive restaurant, get a paper napkin, you can take it with you. It's 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 putting it out on paper so you can see how the story flows and what's happening, so that when you start to write, it's like your aid. I still do it today. I do the same thing for every story we write, and it's just an aid, especially when you're starting out, to make sure you stay on your story and get a good editor.
Mm.
Don't be afraid of people looking at it and saying, "Oh, this is too long, this is too short." Now, get that critical review back from somebody, which is invaluable.
I don't know what sort of advice I'd give, simply because I know, having written 4 books prior to this, and how lonely it can be, and how selfish it can be also, because you're essentially, yeah. And I forget who said this and where I read it, but it was like, most people choose not to write, and as a consequence, no harm ever becomes of them. I think that's a really important thing, because
I like that.
well, it's an odd thing too. Obviously you've got things like you can stand up at your workspace these days, but sitting down and writing and hunched over and looking at a screen and all the rest of it is an unnatural way of dealing with it. But if you feel compelled, and if you feel that you need to um, do it. And I don't believe in writer's block. I've never experienced it. You just write something until you've got something, and then you can work with it. It's a bit like saying, well, I couldn't build the house because I couldn't be inspired. Well, you got to lay a brick and then another one, and then you got to mix the mud and lay another brick. There's no other way around it. It is a very labor intensive process, regardless of things. And that's why I'm really angry with the ways that film, Misery, where, the James Caan character, is writing the book, even though he's cobbled in the bed, and anyway, he writes it, finishes it, and has a cigarette and all the rest of it. I go, man, Stephen King, you're a jerk.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yes, very good.
Yeah,
Very good.
love it.
Well, Susan Rogers and John Roosen, Sean Gorman, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Really appreciate all of your responses, and for your crime and thriller readers out there. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more clickety click clicks on your book, the Yoga Mat series, and Shootin' Through with the fabulous vitamin C orange Valiant Charger on the front, heading off to Sydney. So really appreciate it. Could you share with us tonight and say, remember to read read more Aussie books because that's what we would love all of our authors to do. So good night for now. And remember to read more
more
Aussie
Aussie
books.
books.
Yeah. All
More
right.
Aussie books.
All right.
Bye
Thanks,
for
everybody.
now.
Bye
Thank
for
you.
now.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye.
Let's meet again when magic happens.